Three young sisters are dead, and their father is on the run. Authorities in Washington say the 5, 8, and 9-year-old girls were reported missing last Friday after a scheduled custody visit with their dad. Detectives tracked Travis Decker's vehicle near a campground. That's where they found the girls' bodies. Their cause of death just revealed. Now, a manhunt is underway to find Decker. Police say he's possibly armed and dangerous. I'm your host, Kennedy Walker, and you're watching Law and Crime.
Your memory will never be forgotten, and we will not stop pursuing justice for you until those that were accountable for this are found.
Wenatchee police say the bodies of 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 5-year-old Olivia Decker were found near a remote campground in Wenatchee, Washington, about 2.5 hours away from Seattle. The sisters vanished on Friday, May 30th. Authorities say it appears they had been suffocated. Their mother called authorities when the girls weren't returned after a scheduled custody visit with their father, Travis Decker. Investigators released images of Decker's white 2017 GMC Sierra pickup and eventually tracked the truck to Rock Island Campground. If you look up the campground online, it says visitors are required to physically arrive at the campground to purchase and claim a site. Officers searched the area and found the girls' bodies, but Decker was gone.
Going on 20 years, I don't think I've had a situation that has really almost prompted tears to come up.
Decker's truck was located in a remote area 17 miles up the road from the campground by a Chelan County Forest Service deputy who was patrolling the area on a motorcycle. A manhunt is now underway.
And we will not rest until Travis is located. Travis, if you're listening, this is your opportunity to turn yourself in. Do the right thing. Do what you need to do and take accountability for your actions. We're not going to go away. We're not going to rest. And we're going to make sure we find you. You will be brought to justice. Those young ladies deserve it.
Police are asking those who see him or know about his whereabouts since Friday to call 911 immediately. Police describe Decker as 5'8" and 190 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. A warrant has been issued for his arrest, charging the former military member with 3 counts of kidnapping and first-degree murder. The girl's mother, Whitney Decker, told KIRO News her ex-husband had struggled with mental health since leaving the military, but she never believed he was dangerous. Whitney reportedly told police her ex-husband picked up the girls around 5 p.m. last Friday, but when he didn't bring them back by 8, she got worried. She said she tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She also told investigators Decker was homeless and often stayed at local campgrounds. Wenatchee police said Decker was believed to be living out of his truck. Numerous law enforcement agencies are searching for Decker, including the FBI, Chelan County Sheriff's Office, Emergency Management, and Homeland Security. A GoFundMe has been launched to support Whitney Decker, a mother who, in just one night, lost all 3 of her daughters. And joining me to talk more about this is criminal defense attorney and former assistant district attorney Anthony Osso. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So this case is horrifying. From a legal standpoint, how do courts typically treat cases involving children this young?
They're going to treat them very delicately. There's going to be a lot of attention paid to a case like this, obviously because it's tragic is not even the proper word. It's way worse than that. And so I think it's going to have a lot of attention from the court, their first degree cases. And so the offense is very serious.
And the fact that these were his own kids, does that make the charges more severe? Would it be normal for prosecutors to seek the death penalty in a case like this?
It depends on the law in the state. So depending on what jurisdiction it is, I think in your more conservative states where the death penalty is commonly used, this is the type of case where you could see the death penalty. Again, I don't think authorities have Decker yet, and I'll be interested to see the mental health situation that the defense will likely delve into before a prosecuting office makes that decision.
Yeah, right now, like you said, there is a manhunt underway. He could be caught at any moment now. How does that impact just the timeline of the case legally?
Well, I don't think that the proceedings are going to be able to move forward without a defendant or party to the case, and so it's going to stall any court dates and any court proceedings.
What happens the moment that he is caught, though? Is he arraigned immediately, or do investigators get more time to question him?
So he will likely be, now that there's probable cause for his arrest, I imagine that investigators would read him or his Miranda rights, and then he could either waive those or he could choose to exercise his right to an attorney. But upon his arrest, he's got to be before arraigned or before a magistrate in a very short period of time, approximately 48 hours.
Does the fact that he is on the run, would prosecutors consider that consciousness of guilt?
Absolutely. But I still think, in my opinion, I think that the charges are slightly premature just based on what I've read. I think that treating him as a person of interest or a suspect at this point is appropriate, but to have already filed the charges this early on, I think is jumping the gun. But I do think if the evidence is there, that yes, him fleeing is certainly evidence of consciousness of guilt.
Well, in your experience, why do prosecutors do that? Because he wasn't just charged with murder, he was also charged with kidnapping as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. Because why charge him with kidnapping if obviously the murder charge would trump that?
Right. I strategically, I don't understand it here, except for that it would trigger a warrant, but they already had warrants for his arrest on the kidnapping charges because I think that had something to do with him not answering the phone or violating whatever the terms were of his visitation with the children. I imagine that at this point there are still a lot of unknowns. I know that the cause of death was asphyxiation in this case, but as far as him, aside from him being the last person that was there, or that they were seen with, I don't really see the strategy in filing the murder charges this early on.
Well, do you think because the three little girls were found near his truck? I know
Mhm.
they put out, signs asking everyone to check around. They got his license plate, found the bodies near his truck. And then they are, young, I think 9, 8, and 5 years old. So they can't really get around themselves. I'm thinking maybe that's why.
Sure, and I get that point. I just, again, I think that um, there's nothing preventing investigators from identifying him as a suspect, apprehending him, or even getting a warrant to get some sort of DNA specimen from him to make comparisons to what they find on scene. I just think that there are a lot of things that they could do in an effort prior to filing charges. Again, I do think that with those first degree charges, he's going to be subject to a really high bond, which will help them keep him in custody if he's apprehended.
Right. I'm wondering, do you think that they may even deny the bond? I mean, 3 children dead now.
Yeah, it's possible. It just depends on the laws in the state of Washington and whether the law permits them to deny bond in those cases. Sure, constitutionally, everybody has a right to a bond except for a very specific subset of charges. And so it just depends on state law.
Could leaving the state or hiding in remote areas bring federal charges into this at some point?
I don't think so. I think that this is going to be a state court prosecution. I think that the punishment ranges involved here, it's just the type of case that, in my opinion, will remain within the state. I don't think that they were transported across state lines or anything like that. And so I don't think this triggers any federal charges.
If he, let's say, because he's on the run right now, this happened in Washington, if he's found in California or just somewhere else, could that make the federal charges come, or is it that would only happen if he brought the kids to another state?
I think if he brought the kids to another state, and I don't think that the charge that could be filed federally carries as significant as a punishment range of that of murder in state court, right? So from the federal prosecutor's perspective, they're going to see it as, well, let's let the state court prosecutors handle it. They've got larger teeth sunk in here with a first degree punishment range. And I think that's the appropriate way to handle the case.
Let's move on to evidence. Obviously, we're getting more details every moment now, but from an evidence perspective, how crucial is it that they found the girl's body near Mr. Decker's vehicle?
Very crucial. I think if you are putting together a timeline as a prosecutor, he's the last person that's documented having been with them. They're found near the truck. I think his cell phone is found near that campsite or where that truck was, and then leaving that area. So it's evidence that puts him on that scene where the girls were found. It's a crucial piece of evidence in this case.
If there's no confession or eyewitnesses, can circumstantial evidence alone still lead to a life sentence? Because the way I see it, 3 little girls, ages 9, 8, and 5, were on a visit with their dad. The dad disappears, yet the girls are found dead near the dad's truck. Even if, let's say, hypothetically, he says he didn't do it, I just don't know how you argue that. So can circumstantial evidence lead to him still going to jail for life, potentially?
Absolutely, Kennedy. when I was a prosecutor, I oftentimes thought that circumstantial evidence is better than witness testimony, because circumstantial evidence doesn't lie. And you put together things like DNA. And I imagine that when they conduct the autopsies in this case, they will swab the areas on the bodies of these children that were possibly where they were strangled and make DNA comparisons. That's the kind of circumstantial evidence. Well, I'd argue that's direct evidence, but that's the kind of direct evidence that they will couple with circumstantial evidence to try and make a case against Mr. Decker here.
If this goes to trial, what kind of defense strategy could his lawyers even try here?
Based on what I've seen so far, I think that they can make an argument as to the identity of the defendant, that Mr. Decker didn't commit the crime. I think that they could, and I think based on what I'm seeing about his potential bipolar disorder and possible lack of medication at the time, I think they might have an insanity defense that they could explore. I think the two are exclusive of each other. So you've got to kind of pick one or the other there.
Yeah, mental health has come up. Could that be used as part of an insanity defense? And how often do those actually work? Because I feel like we hear about those a lot, so many people claiming insanity. But if you could just walk us through the process and tell us if that actually works in a lot of these cases.
There has been success in these cases. But I can't give you a percentage of whether it's 25, 75% of the time. I mean, it's a case by case basis. And if the evidence supports a theory of insanity that the defendant didn't recognize the consequences of their actions at the time, then there's an argument to be made. I think what's important here, and to your earlier point, Kennedy, is that Mr. Decker fled from the scene. And if that can be established, that indicates a consciousness of guilt and a recognition of the consequences of what he did.
Right, because I'm reporting on a similar case out in Florida, and I was talking to an attorney just trying to figure out if the mom could use an insanity defense because she's accused of killing her son, but she stayed. And his body was there for a couple of weeks and she stayed and she never fled. And so it's just, that consciousness of guilt is a little different here in this case, like how you mentioned, because he did leave the scene. But Mr. Decker also has a documented history of PTSD from military service, we're told. Could that change the outcome or the sentence as well, since he was, a part of our military?
Certainly. I think that PTSD is something that's a lot more widely recognized currently, and it does go towards punishment. So even if the defense can't establish an insanity at the guilt innocence phase, it's certainly relevant to mitigating punishment in the punishment phase, to say that he was struggling with these things and they were a cause of his actions in this case, and for that reason he should be prosecuted less severely than somebody who's thinking clearly and doesn't have mental health issues.
Right. And the mother, the girl's mother, she spoke with one of the local stations out in Washington saying that her ex-husband struggled with mental health ever since he came back from the military. So, we're just trying to figure out if that could be used, some type of, if he does have a documented history of PTSD. I'm sure that will come out later. But we know that this all happened during a custody visit. Could the family court system come under scrutiny if he had prior red flags?
It's possible. I haven't seen those files, but assuming that they knew that there was mental health and that he was homeless and didn't have a secure place where he was supposed to keep the children, I think that raises a lot of red flags.
Speaking of that, with that coming out that he was homeless, how exactly does he get to have a custody visit knowing that he doesn't have a home to even bring the girls to?
I can't quite answer that. I think that there must have been a specially crafted visitation order. I do think there are people that live on the road and travel and live out of an RV, but my understanding is he was living motel to motel, campsite to campsite, which is a little different. And so I think it's odd.
Right. And we don't know if he became homeless before, if he was homeless the entire time during this agreement, or if this recently happened. Again, I'm sure we'll get more details soon. But
Sure.
if I'm just trying to figure out, could the girl's mother potentially even sue the state or any agency involved in approving the custody visit now that this has happened?
So there's a lot of red tape in suing the state and the court. So I think that that's probably unlikely. It's also hard to suggest that he would commit such a heinous crime, right? I think in hindsight, it's easy to say, oh, well, this guy was clearly on the verge of committing a crime, but causing the death of his three daughters isn't probably something that a court would find that that judge or the state was able to foresee. And so I don't think that there will be a lawsuit against that judge, based on just the difficulty in predicting this.
If this case does go to trial and it's highly public, how
Mhm.
do they ensure, an impartial jury?
Well, that's part of what the voir dire portion of trial is, and through jury selection, the court will ask, and oftentimes the lawyers will be able to question the potential jurors about their knowledge of the facts in this case, and if they are aware of the facts of the case, or they are aware or do know the parties involved, will that have any will that cause them to be biased or sway their judgment in the case? And so there's a screening process that takes place beforehand.
Could he plead guilty and avoid a trial altogether, or would prosecutors still want this to go to court to show justice for the family?
He could absolutely plead guilty, Kennedy, and most of the time that's what we see. Most cases are worked out through plea negotiations, and we're just reading news stories at this point. But until he's apprehended and all the evidence is put together, it's hard to tell whether there's holes in the state's theory, whether there's risk involved for prosecutors to go to trial. And so oftentimes a plea is a way for prosecutors to secure a conviction and avoid the appeal process and bring finality in the case for the family.
And speaking of the family, I mean, that poor mother overnight just losing her three children. Where does healing begin for her? Does the court offer any type of mental health services?
Yes, they do, but that's going to be a long road, and it's a road that I've never been down, and I don't think most people have. So it's going to be extreme grief, and shock, I think, for a long time for her. They will have oftentimes through the district attorney's office victim assistance coordinators or social workers that meet with the victims, offer counseling services to the victims, and then keep the victim informed throughout the proceedings in court.
And before I let you go, if you could just walk us through a timeline here, if that Mr. Decker is caught, how long, if this does go to trial, how long could this whole process take? Are we talking about weeks, months, years?
Years, in my opinion. I think with three dead bodies, them being children, and the familial nature of this case, it's going to be deemed extremely complex. I don't see this case going to trial within a year. And there's a lot of evidence that the state still likely needs to collect that they can do so after Mr. Decker is apprehended. For example, collecting a biological specimen from him to compare to the other evidence that they've already collected on the scene, as well as to the autopsies of the three children. So it's going to take a long time.
If he was a member of our military, though, do you think his DNA is already in the system?
It's possible, and that could be used for like oftentimes when people are already inmates in the system, they'll be matched through CODIS, but it's still a requirement that they get an initial or a supplemental specimen. So it just depends on the policy of the crime laboratory in Washington, and the quality of the specimen that the military may or may not have.
Gotcha. Well, this is a story that we will be following closely. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
The three sisters attended school in the Wenatchee School District. In a letter to families, the Wenatchee School District superintendent wrote, quote, "Our thoughts are with the family, the entire Lincoln Elementary community, and everyone touched by this situation." The district says grief counselors are available for students and staff. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedy Walker.